Okay, now everyone, let's welcome our first panel, decentralizing the next layer of Ethereum infrastructures with anti-slashing and DK witness. Let's welcome. Hey everyone, I'm Luca and happy to moderate this panel. I have some pre-prepared questions that I'll try to tweak a little bit just to have more fun. But let's start first with our own introduction. I don't think I know all of you. I know your projects probably. I'll go last, so please, Andy, can you start?
Hi, I'm Andy. I'm a book author, investor, and just do some posts on X. Love to meet everybody. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Amir. I look after business development on Linear. It's a ZK EVM layer 2 roll up onto Ethereum. And yeah, prior to that, I was focused on consensus and MetaMask as well.
Everybody, nice to see you. I'm Mike Massari. I am Chief Strategic Advisor at Redstone Oracle, fastest Oracle in the space, and VP at Eon, which is a PayFi project. I also do advise and help a few other projects in the space, being since 2017 in blockchain, so not digital platforms.
Amir, I'm the founder of Puffer Finance. We have launched the first permissionless free staking protocol. We didn't stop there in our effort in decentralizing Ethereum and making it accessible to all. And recently, we launched our own base rollup stack that is fully composable with Ethereum. Happy to start talking about this.
Nice. So I'm Luca. I do research at Altobit. Altobit is a, you can see it has a public good company. We do risk assessments of the L2s, of all the rollups. We try to expand also doing risk analysis for data availability layers, for bridges in general. We're trying to expand also to do risk assessment of tokens. So we'll probably also talk about liquid staking tokens, especially. So okay, let's start with the question. So the first question that I have here is about threat to Ethereum infrastructure, especially threat to decentralization, right? So like one of the values, I also have talked yesterday on this token, but one of the core values we want to maintain in Ethereum, which kind of differentiates Ethereum from the other layers, is decentralization, right? And we, a lot of time we need to make trade-offs when we want to preserve this value. But I think it's that market forces a lot of times try to push for the opposite direction, because when you centralize things are faster. The UX is probably nicer, and but this is not really within our values, right? So what we want to achieve, so what do you see as the biggest threats? Like, do you see like all this new protocol, like Hyperliquid comes to mind. This like very centralized, very fast. You think decentralization is a threat?
That's great. Yeah. I do believe like it's the biggest value out of Ethereum. If you look at like where biggest asset holders are now parking their assets, including stable coins and ETH and like many other assets, you can see already in the total value locked on Ethereum that they're trusting Ethereum for a reason. You look at USDT, 45% of USDT supply is on Ethereum. USDC, almost all of the supply is on Ethereum. And these are because of this decentralization. At Puffer, like the first risk of centralization that we have observed, that recently we have seen the damages of it as well, was centralized staking operators that are not bonded. A lot of like liquid staking protocols or liquid staking protocols tend to use these centralized operators without any real value locked or any skin in the game by these operators other than reputation itself. For example, we've seen one of the biggest operators recently, like some of their infra got hacked and they had to like exit a lot of their validators, which caused like big congestion on the exit queue.
You're talking about kill.
Yes. And the issue was Thankfully, no slashing happened, but the keys, of course, were exposed and other things. That's why at Puffer, all of the validators are bonded on the operator side by 2 ETH. So even if $5 billion were get to slash, it's the money that the operators brought to the game, which means that they're actually having a skin in the game and there's an active insurance. That's one of the sides that Puffer is contributing to. And in addition to that, this 2 ETH bond allows anyone to run a validator, meaning that it actually helps decentralize Ethereum more. But on the side of like scaling and the trade-offs of scaling, like the speed of development versus like adaptation. Yes, we had this actually this debate many times. Like we first saw it when Solana was coming out, and everybody was saying that hey, Solana was able to scale by sacrificing decentralization because they are faster, they can perform faster. But we can see like centralized system can go just so far. Even with the amount of TVL that is on Hyperliquid or other platforms that are heavily centralized, you can already see the trust hasn't been to a level that people are going to break beyond like 10 billion, 20 billion, 40 billion of deposits because the big asset holders, like it's hard for them to trust it. That's where I do believe decentralization is a big factor, but if we want to develop something to get users on board, it is okay to start slightly more centralized, but having decentralization on the roadmap as the main goal is the only way we can scale the entire blockchain to its full capacity. That's where, of course, at Puffer, we started also delving into base rollups, which is the ultimate format of like decentralized sequencing and shared sequencing. And we do believe that value is going to be delivered once we're talking about big asset managers and big asset holders that are like trying to come on chain to the most trustless platforms.
I think it's an interesting point that you raise, because on one end, you're right, we've all been in crypto for a very long time, and so centralization is the enemy, right? It always was the enemy. Like one of the main reasons why this whole thing started was to move away from single trusted parties, right? Especially finance. At the same time, now we're seeing a little bit of an opposite trend, right? We're seeing institutions coming on chain, we're seeing people that are very used to centralize finance or centralized systems, bringing a lot of money on chain. And these are 10, 20, 40 billions of dollars. Right? So I think it's a balance. I don't think that prioritizing decentralization at all costs at every stage of the game is the right choice. I think that the right choice is prioritizing what is important for the user. We were very much in a situation in which decentralization was the most important thing for the users, and permissionlessness was the most important thing for the users. I mean, we need to be honest with ourselves, now it's not anymore. That is not the focus of institutions. So I think that what we need to do as an industry is strike a balance between our core values of decentralization and permissionlessness and trust minimization and what actually makes people money, what actually brings money on chain. If we want mass adoption, we cannot do it with decentralization 100% at every stage. This has been proven over the past years. And this is why protocols like Hyperliquid are so successful, because they are also anti-self, right? Because they're happy to move quickly, they're happy to make decisions where without having a DAO or without having to operate multiple nodes or convincing people to operate multiple nodes. I do agree on the principle that decentralization is always good and needs to be prioritized at every stage when it can be, but realistically I don't think this is something that can be done at every single stage of every single project.
Yeah, it's this continuous debate that's been going on forever. I'll just sort of like maybe bring it back to some examples that we experienced in our company. So Linea is basically something that was incubated out of consensus. Consensus, originally sort of set up a wallet like MetaMask, also RPC infrastructure like Infura. If we go back in time, when Infura was first launched and became sort of the most popular sort of SaaS RPC environment, it was handling about 80% of all Ethereum traffic. So whilst the network itself is decentralized, you then have this centralizing point. And what was very uncomfortable for us was that all of that traffic was going through one region of AWS. And so not only was it centralized in terms of us as an entity, but also it was centralized with the cloud provider in a specific region. So all of that made us very uncomfortable. We sort of stopped actively marketing it and to allow others to take market share, and then we also then progressively decentralized the protocol underneath, and now we're about to launch an AES that supports the decentralization of that RPC infrastructure. But we couldn't do that. Like what we're trying to do by decentralizing the RPC infrastructure now was not possible back in 2018, for example. So it's also like, I think we just have to allow our industry to evolve and develop. Like Eigenlayer didn't exist, restaking didn't exist, the proof of stake network didn't exist, LSTs and LRTs didn't exist. So all of these things weren't there, and now that those are there, we're able to start to decentralize that portion of the infrastructure. On the wallet side, MetaMask is like constantly in this battle, and we've been heavily criticized about how bad our UI is, right? Everyone loves to like FUD on UI. But I spent like 2 whole years just trying to improve the security of the wallet and stop users getting drained without centralizing. All other wallets were basically just layering in APIs and sharing pre-signed transaction data. What we were trying to do is to layer in security without like compromising on privacy and bringing in yet more centralizing forces. So there's a huge pressure at the UI level to centralize because it just improves UI. Like you can, and like MetaMask itself has like 50 different API providers, right? And what we're trying to do is then see if we can decentralize a portion of that API layer and create marketplaces so that using slashing mechanisms and so on. But once again, those mechanisms weren't there previously, and so so you have this sort of huge battle between I want the perfect UI experience, and I'm competing with Hyperliquid, and I'm competing with Binance and all of these things, and yet we still want to preserve the integrity of security, privacy, decentralization as being that sort of like principle. And we've got the same sort of challenges at the layer 2 side as well, I think, where with layer 2s at the moment, I think all but one are, because I think it's Starknet that's the only one that's decentralized, but all other layer 2s are centralized, right? They run a centralized sequencer. We are those. Is it centralized?
Yes.
I thought it was progressively decentralized.
There are some nuances.
Nuances.
Yeah,
that's okay. But I think most of us in the layer 2 space have a goal to decentralize, right? We want to decentralize the sequencer and the prover, but that is like it was hard enough just getting performant ZK proofs, right? It's hard enough to try to get fast finality on Ethereum. These are all really difficult technical and engineering challenges, and so you just have to give us time. This is what I would say, and be patient. But I think you're right to the point that institutions will insist on decentralization over time because there's too much risk with putting huge amounts of real-world assets on chain in a centralized manner. It's just too risky, and so it will be forced by market forces.
I'm the money guy, right? I'm not the tech guy. So to be real honest right now, what we are seeing, for the next level of decentralization is not to decentralize every single point, because it's just going to be really tough. So what effectively we are talking about right now is to have a decentralized middleware, right? So the anti-slashing is there, the ZK readiness is there, and it's somewhat decentralized, right? So we need that middleware to keep things to a certain decentralized standards. But ultimately, from a money standpoint and also from a more user standpoint, many of this money and users are just coming in because they want to make money, right? If they want to make money, you need to have better UX, you need to have a better yield, so that they can just come in. Whether the users think that it's decentralized or not decentralized, most users, including VCs like myself, we don't really care. just to be very honest,
Yeah, but I think there are levels to that, right?
Of
Like,
course,
there's
of
like
course.
a 5-year and then a 10-year plan, and then
Of
the
course.
size of the VC, whose money is in the VC,
Correct.
right? Like, there's of course like categories of.
But you have to see this in a very progressive manner, right? So if we look at it in a very short term right now, at this so-called bull run, we want people to bring in the money, right? We are not going to stop them and say, hey, your money is not decentralized. Let's not play, right? Let's not do it together. We need the money to come in. We need the users to come in. So sometimes when I talk to my own portfolio companies, I will tell them that, hey, we could talk about idealization, the most ideal situation in the bear market. We could build as much as we can. But at the same time, we should still keep to our roots of staying decentralized. Right? So that's why I'm also the chairperson of a movement called Re-Decentralized. I mean, it's strange to use a word like re-decentralized, but what we should do is to redefine how we should position the whole decentralized agenda. Because we are here because it's decentralized. Of course, the security is going to be there, but most importantly, right now, I just felt that the more important thing is to get the money flow in. Once we get the money flow in, the people is going to come in, and then we will have a more prolonged bull run, per se. So again, love decentralization, but we love to make the money, man.
Yeah, I kind of agree with this. Like if you see like the top successful protocols, they all kind of started centralized, right? Just to test the grounds, whether
They try to pretend they are, sometimes.
Yeah, that's our job to my job allowed to be to try to call them off. But the thing is, decentralization is like instrumental to something else, right? We shouldn't decentralize things for the sake of decentralization. There should be there must be a purpose of this, right? And the purpose is security. And one thing that we usually don't think about is that security has to do with UX, right? Because if you have a lot of funds in a protocol and you lose those funds, that's not great UX, right? So it's important to decentralize, to protect user funds, but also it's like we need to be careful about not being too idealistic, I think, and try to decentralize for the sake of decentralization. For example, if there are some components whose failure is not critical to user funds, like centralized sequencers, right? If a centralized sequencer goes down in a rollup in an L2, it is a problem, but not a big problem, because user funds cannot be stolen still. There are first transactions, ideally there are, or like for example, I've seen recently on Twitter a lot of projects, for example, starting to post DA, data availability, to IGDA or to Celestia. And they announce these amazing partnerships, but the thing is, a lot of time they miss why are they doing this? Like why is it the case that you need to post data availability to Celestia? And if you don't explain, like if there's no benefit in security, like if you post data, but all the rest is like controlled by a single entity, then I think we're confusing people. We're telling them, okay, we're decentralizing without explaining what's the purpose. So I think we need to be careful when we do this.
Maybe I just add one last comment too. It's amazing to be excited about things like Hyperliquid, but in grand scheme of things, look at the volume that moves into Hyperliquid. JP Morgan and Repo move like 4 trillion a day. And we're so excited and hyped, like, oh wow, look at Hyperliquid, it's so successful, clap hands. But then if we want in the next 5 to 10 years bring Repo to like on to chain, if we want to do these massive amounts of transactions, no one is gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna do a HIP3. Like JP Morgan is gonna get up, like I'm gonna do a HIP3 and then I'm gonna use like Hyperliquid backend. Like that is unrealistic. And I do believe like Ethereum has been like so long-term focused on this and we have succeeded in this. If we want in the next 5 to 10 years bring that 4 trillion to do our on-chain infra, it has to be progressive, decentralized and secure.
I want to chip in as well. I totally agree on this, but again, I'm not a believer of this RWA bullshit about stock and so forth. But I felt that if we really need the big banks or the bigger money to come in, key industries, for example, like the whole supply chain industry, how the finance is going to come on board. how the money flow is going to come on board. I think that supply chain space, even if it's only for shipping alone, you could bring in trillions of dollars. We need more of these real use cases where they can bring in real money. Not asking Web3 guys to buy some Web2 bullshit products and thinking that we are not that smart. We need real money flow to come in, and that adds on to what Amir is saying.
So going to the next question. The next question talk about anti-slashing, and I'm not really sure what it is about. I would love one of you to explain what it is. But in general, the topic that we want to discuss is, there is a lot of excitement about like liquid staking tokens, so like staking in general. Everyone loves yield, and it got to a point, I feel like, where it kind of has become a systemic risk in some cases. Like if you see, we track TVS of a lot of projects on Altobit, and we have a TVS breakdown where we show like which tokens are in this TVS, and you can see where that in a lot of protocols there is much more liquid staking tokens representing ETH rather than ETH itself, right? And I want your take on like what are the risks of this liquid staking token, and whether there are any measures. Like for example, another thing that is very interesting that was announced recently is with Linea, there was this plan of having a native yield bridge. We've been discussing with the technical team of Linea this plan to use Lido. I don't remember V2, V3, or V4, one of them. Which is something that is supposed to kind of decentralize the lab infrastructure to depend less on Lido, because Lido, has been very, very big. There were a lot of discussions about systemic risk of Lido. I think it is a little bit better with the new LSDs, but it's still big, right? So what's your opinion on this?
Yeah, so I can jump in this. People are surprised this statement that I'm about to make is like, LSDs were originally like certainly a systemic risk the way that they started. We had validators, and the purpose of that 32 ETH initially was to have stake on securing a network. If you're dishonest, you should get slashed. Or if you try to do malicious activity, you would get slashed, you would lose money. That was the whole point of proof of stake. But proof of stake provided an opportunity. It had a very nice, juicy yield. Not a lot of people at home either had 32 ETH or had the knowledge of running a validator or the risk of running a validator. That's where liquid staking or pooled liquid staking became such an attractive thing. I'm gonna just put my half an ETH there to earn 3.5% and pool it with other folks. So it became a good mechanic to get access to yield in a more capitally efficient manner. While it increased the risk, at least on the initial LSDs that they launched, all they were doing, they were gathering people's ETH, pulling it together into 32 ETH chunks, and we're just going knocking on some data center or data center operator door, like, hey, run the validators for me. The data center operator does not have any skin in this game. Basically, they're just selling their compute. If in a case the data center operator decides to do slashing, decides to do maliciously, or one person who works at a data center admin just decides to do something basically malicious, it's gone. It just disappears. Or if someone is not careful, they get social engineering attacks, like killing and others. This just disappears. It also like clogs the network, as they are doing it right now. So that was the systemic risk that the LSDs like introduced, at least within the initial versions. That's where at Puffer we came in and we were like, okay, we know it. LSDs are efficient. Now they exist, and everybody is going to adopt them regardless. How can we put guardrails around it to make them as safe as possible? The first step we did, of course, in collaboration with Justin Drake's idea of anti-slashers, was to create these easy-to-access hardware modules that really prevent from slashing transaction to be signed. And if everybody adopts that, in effect, even if there's a malicious takeover of the admin, the key is locked inside of these lockers, which were TDs at the time. And they cannot do transactions that are outside of their permission. That was our first step on creating anti-slashers in proof stake. In addition to that, we said, okay, no more not having skin in the game data center. Per Ethereum validator, per these 32 ETH, 2 ETH of it should be owned by the data center operator. So if they decide to do a malicious slashing, they will get slashed. Of course, Ethereum slashing is scaled, and we're basically insured up to 2% of total ETH slashed, staking slashed right now on buffer. So we took these 2 steps to make sure that now that liquid staking is here, it's an efficient market, people want to participate, it's safer than ever. We can extend that later on to other things as well. Now you're speaking of restaking, where we do run the restaking ABS as pre-conf ABS as well. You can extend slashing, anti-slashing there. So anti-slashing is this sort of guardrail for some of the centralized operators, in addition to bond and economic security that they bring to the table to reduce the systemic risk of LSDs and LRTs on these sites.
So you mentioned TEs, but like what other forms of anti-slashing there can be?
For now, it is TEs because it is, you can think of it as a ledger, like wallet that we all use to sign and the keys are locked inside of the ledger. But this one was even more limited. You can do only certain transactions or else your transaction will not go through. The trust model here is like you're just protecting yourself from making a mistake.
Yeah, not much to add there actually. To be honest, I completely agree. I think that the moment that you detach the risk from the person that's actually putting the money that potentially gets penalized if something goes wrong, then inevitably you create a systemic risk. So the whole idea of proof of stake was you actually have to put your own capital. You actually have to guarantee that your computation is going to be safe and it's not going to be malicious, and your actions are not going to be malicious. What these protocols effectively do is separate those two things, right? So you play with someone else's money, and obviously playing with someone else's money reduces your personal risk a lot, but increases the risk of the network a lot. So I do appreciate what you guys are doing. I think that's like having guardrails around it is the only way that we can actually protect the networks. And we just talked about decentralization. This is a very important aspect of how to protect the network and keep it decentralized by tying back up the risk with the, call it punishment, right? To call it the sanction.
You sort of mentioned linear. I think we've got a plan. We haven't done it yet, but we've got a plan to introduce something called native yield, which some people question whether that's the right wording as well, whereby we basically stake the ETH on the native bridge and then direct that yield into specific parts of the ecosystem. I think it's quite sort of like experimental, because I think it's us and Katana that are looking at these mechanisms. We're trying to do it in a sort of sensitive manner, very much consultatively with the EF, with Justin, with yourselves, for example. So I think we will very much listen to, we're very much ETH maxis and we want the health of ETH. We've got a fully EVM compliant layer 2. We've programmed the entire EVM client. So, we support Besu as one of the, and Teku as client diversity. So we're not here to sort of try to bring down, we're here very much for Ethereum. But the challenge with having a proof of stake network is that if you don't stake, you are losing your share of the network, right? Naturally. And so proof of stake does drive everyone to want to stake. And it's going to happen with the digital asset treasuries, it's going to happen with ETFs. So, and I don't have the long-term, I don't know what the long-term answer is in terms of that balance. It's something that is probably beyond my brain capacity to sort of work out what the consequences are. But we've been several discussions where it needs to be debated and thought through.
think from my point of view is that we've all this nice anti-slashing solution. It really helps to keep a lot of these investors' money more viable. And at least it's not going to be slashed to zero, right? If you use Puffer, you can get 2% insured, vice versa with other solutions. But I just felt that it goes back to the same thing that we talked about right in the very beginning, right? So with that kind of staking or even restaking, the main thing is to really keep ourselves clean and decentralized. Right? If it's run by multiple centralized entity trying to be decentralized, so what we are trying to do is it's just going to be a waste, right? But from my point of view is just keep getting the 3.2 or 3%. I think is good enough, Fair?
Yeah, so I think we have time just for another question, and this is more like a vibe check. And this is the Ethereum stage, and Ethereum is kind of betting all its scaling roadmap to ZK. And we started experimenting with ZK with the rollup-centric roadmap 5 years ago. We have a few ZK rollups, and right now the plan seems to be to bring also this technology back to Ethereum itself. There is this initiative for trying to get to real-time proving, try to ZK-prove L1 blocks so that not only rollups have this massive scale, this potential massive scale, but also L1 as well, right? The idea here is to try to get Ethereum itself to like 10,000 TPS, data availability, if data availability allows, of course. Good news is data availability is like massively scalable, so that shouldn't be a problem. But the thing is, I remember talking with the Ethereum Foundation like years back, and they had this very big concern regarding a multi-billion-dollar SPAC, right? Because ZK is experimental, was experimental, and kind of still is, right? It's a new technology, it's very complicated. It's new month, and we also like try to collect bugs in our page, our website, and we see bugs every month, even less. There was one in Risk Zero recently. There was a couple of months back one in Clocky 3, which is used in a lot of these ZK VMs. All of them had to upgrade, and but the thing is, ZK seems an amazing technology. It brings so many benefits. This couple of days there has been amazing pump of Zcash for the privacy aspect of ZK. So the question for you is, how do you feel about ZK in general? What's your vibe? Like, do you agree that, like, are you optimistic, which is ironic to say, about ZK, or you can see something that risks, for example, having this multi-billion-dollar bug that Ethereum Foundation fears, and maybe that would put the whole technology, as not people that would put people not trusting the technology anymore.
Yeah, so not a lot of people know, but ZK is what really got me to the industry. I got totally nerd sniped by this because I was focusing on Harvard back at NASA Jet Propulsion Labs back in the day. To give you an overview, like maybe not a lot of people know how ZK works, like ZK does act a lot like a black box. Like after you implement the circuits, like unless if you see the results out of it, it's hard to catch bugs. It makes it challenging. Even though it's an amazing tech that we can use different aspects of it, especially on verifiability. That's the aspect that we're going to use a lot on scaling in the Lean Ethereum roadmap that is like started by Justin Drake recently. Is we can now condense our state. Instead of having these clunky, massive nodes that carry a lot of data, we can condense the network using ZK through verifiability to make sure the network runs fast. The idea is amazing. That's how, of course, like ZK rollups and others like started to scale. And this is like the 10,000 TPS on the L1 means millions of TPS on rollups later as well. So that's where the AppChain specific roadmap that Puffer is working on, we're counting on this scaling. But of course, like you mentioned, there are inherent risks with these black boxes. What if something breaks on the other? And That's where like we do see like a 5-year roadmap, first of all, 5 to 10 years to actually achieve it completely. But we did work on researches that offer along with EF and Justin, for example, 2FA for ZK. Like this idea of 2FA for ZK was TEEs are not the black box. You can just run your entire client inside of it, and you can check the results of verifiable result after TE with your ZK output. You can continuously do this with your ZK in parallel to make sure that the outputs are matched as expected. You can of course then block the transaction on the other end if they don't match. It's either a bug in the client or it's a bug in the ZK. Then we can revisit and fix this. That was an effort into deploying and using the ZK black box circuits at the same time of catching the bugs. So we can have usability over time and catch bugs at the same time. But yeah, I do agree with you. Like, there needs to be certainly more effort into formal verification, all the other efforts that are around like ZK circuits to be able to catch bugs. But overall, I am quite optimistic that we will eventually, like any other tech, we will be able to, over time and progressively, achieve the ultimate scaling through the ZK tech. It's going to also create a foundation to achieve ultimate privacy, which should be the default of any network in the future. So yeah, I'm quite bullish, but yes, with a lot of footnotes and asterisks on the way, I am very much bullish on this roadmap.
Yeah, I agree with the both of you. I think that we're definitely not quite there yet. Overall, from both a privacy perspective, I'm very glad you raised that at the very end, but also from a technical perspective, I was very bullish and still am very bullish on ZK, even in a roll-up stage, even compared to optimistic roll-ups. So I do think that the move that Ethereum is doing towards ZK is definitely the right move. There is a long way to go, or a somewhat long way to go when it comes to the technology, because now not only the technology is not there for, from an execution perspective, but I don't think it's there from a research perspective quite yet. So I'm not a researcher, so I don't know really much about this, but from the outside, as a technical person, as a product person, I still see gaps in what can be achieved. So direction, 100% correct. Execution, probably, yes, still like a 3 to 5 year roadmap, I would think.
Hurts when you're running a ZK network for 2 years and you're saying it's not there yet. I think that, I think it's just like AI, you can't sort of say we are there or we're not. This thing's going to just continuously evolve. Like when we first started looking at this stuff, like way back, the consensus was that we'd have to like scale via sharding, and no one thought ZK was even possible, right? And we were using ZK to try to scale private networks for people like MasterCard and Visa and those sort of guys, and because the TPS that we're getting through private betting networks was nowhere near good enough for them. And then clearly that whole private permission stuff went away, and I'm glad it did. But what came out of that for us was the realization that some of the R&D technology we'd invested in was actually able to be deployed into public networks to help scaling. Ethereum is part of the roll-up centric scaling. So I think you just compare where we were then to where we are now. We're just like light years ahead, and the maths keeps just significantly improving, almost like on a quarterly basis now. We're getting like these insane improvements. So who knows where we'll be in like 2-3 years. And so I'm super bullish about it. Earlier on this week, Swift announced that they were going to work with us on their sort of next generation stuff, and I think that provides some sort of endorsement. I think not directly, but like a sort of endorsement for what's happening. So I'm positive if those like the kings of centralized messaging services and across banking are sort of thinking this could be like a direction, I'm bullish, right? this is very positive for the industry.
I think it's still positive. You know, it takes time for technology to really grow. You know, right now maybe in some circle, ZK is well developed, right? It's always developing. You know, but and I also believe that many projects are ZK ready, right? So what we can really do is to stretch out what we're seeing right now, give everyone a bit more time. The adoption is going to come. You know, the big boys are coming in. You know, just give everybody some time. So bullish or not, I think right now it's still very bullish, honestly.
Okay, we're over time, so thank you very much for joining.
Thank you, everybody.